Hello everyone, welcome to an analysis of dance where we discuss the movements and debuts of the Billboard Hot Dance charts in immaculate detail with in-depth reviews of each debut each week. Well, this week certainly beat all expectations for me because wow, this was busy as all hell. I mean, yes, I knew that the top 10 would shake up quite a bit thanks to some big songs coming that honestly I'm surprised weren't here earlier, but in general it felt like this chart was just going through a weird motion this week. I mean, some of these debuts are just bizarre across the board, and with a lot of them likely to stick around, yeah, this could actually be promising going into 2025. This was a surprisingly good week. I'm really excited to talk about it. But okay, top 10, where Miles on It by Marshmello and Kane Brown is still at number 1. This was expected, but more interesting is where it's going to end up in the next couple of weeks, considering that the album bomb from Kendrick Lamar is going to likely knock it off the Hot 100 entirely next week and give room to possibly something else getting here, but most likely it's going to stick at number 1 for a while, as even though radio and streaming are starting to fall back considerably, they're just way too strong to get anything above it at this point. Shame too, because Apple by Charlie XCX is at least making a run at number 2. It's got big radio, and even if streaming is still not that great on this at the moment, it is at least doing decently there. I can see this at least having a bit of staying power if it manages to survive through Christmas. That could be interesting at least. Then there's Guest by Charlie XCX featuring Billie Eilish at number 3. Okay, seriously, if there's a time to push a new single from Brat, it's really this one, and at this point, considering Apple is really peaking on streaming, you have every reason to push this on radio. It's not that hard of a sell, guys. Come on, it's got Billie Eilish on it. I mean, you already clearly had luck with 360 by Charlie XCX at number 4, which is collapsing across the board and finally has left the radio charts for good. And really, with this being a complete non-presence on streaming, I'm honestly surprised that's still up this high. Same deal with Houdini by Dua Lipa at number 5, and this one I actually see being in danger of being knocked off entirely next week. It's all down to whether the new Stromae single, which actually has a huge amount of streaming, is likely to debut on the Hot 100, which is insane to me. Yeah, it's all down to whether this particular track is actually considered dance, and considering the sound of it, it could get there. I'm at least excited for that. But of course, alongside that, the big story of this week comes in our massive jump into the top 10 for Passaporte by Raul Alejandro and Mr. Nice Guy at number 6, mainly here because of the album's impact, where it gained a huge boost on streaming, and even if it wasn't one of the biggest songs from the album, I'm at least happy it made the top 10. It's gonna most likely make the year-end list at this point, and considering Raul Alejandro's got a consistently strong streak of singles there, yeah, I'm definitely not complaining about this joining them. It's a really good song too. And with that, the remainder of the top 10 really just got knocked down because of overwhelming challenges. Starting off with Sao Paulo by The Weeknd and Anita at number 7. Honestly, it's still getting a decent radio push, which for a song of this kind is absolutely unreal to me, but it hasn't really got much streaming behind it, and man, it's falling at a record pace. I'm really worried about this new album's rollout at this point. Same deal with Sympathy is a Knife by Charlie XCX featuring Ariana Grande at number 8, which is collapsing on streaming, and given that it doesn't have anything else supporting it at this point, yeah, this is on its way out quite comfortably. Then there's Move by Adam Port and Strive featuring Malachi at number 9, and honestly, I'm just amazed that this is still charting this high at all. I thought the Camila Cabello remix would absolutely kill off the momentum for this, but it's actually sticking around decently well. Thank God too, because we have a new song in the top 10 and number 10 that I was unfortunately predicting, Forever Young by David Guetta, Alphaville, and Ava Max at number 10. And look, you can tell this was absolutely industry boosted, considering it's not got much streaming at all, and sales are decent but not great, but it's here because of its huge radio push, and considering the song is absolutely atrocious, I can only hope this stalls out in record time. We really don't need David Guetta in the top 10 anymore. This trend is getting old as hell. And on that note, that leads to our falls and fall-offs, where again, it's more revealing that Charlie XCX dominated the latter category, with the last 3 consistently falling remixes finally exiting, being I Might Say Something Stupid featuring John Hopkins in the 1975, Rewind featuring Bladey, and Spring Breakers featuring Kesha. Really, I don't expect any of these to make the year-end list for 2025, and honestly, considering they're not exactly some of my favorites on the remix album, I'm not exactly upset about it either. But what's more telling comes in our falls, where the huge number of debuts just did an absolute number on the bottom half of the chart especially. Yes, we saw Supernova Love by Ivan David Guetta just plummet down to 28, let's keep it going, this song sucks. As well as Part of My Hands by John Summer and Venby actually surviving really high up at 29, which considering it only got here because of a remix, that's honestly quite interesting. I'm really curious if this might actually stick around at all. But really, the rest feel like songs that could have been stable in other weeks, but honestly have just been bulldozed down because of these debuts. Stars Will Align by Kygo and Imagine Dragons is just continuing to tank down to 31. X-Slide by 2KE and 808 Yuli collapsed down to 37 and probably will be gone next week. Good. Roy by Mickey finally took a well-deserved hit down to 38. Aura and Glory by Oguzek fell down to 41 and 46 respectively as they finally leave a good riddance again. Same deal with Forever by Diplo and Hugo featuring Malou and Yuna down to 47, and Kisses by Bless and Cameron Watson featuring BB Close at 48. And finally, Void by ISQ fell down to 49 as a song that's honestly grown on me a little bit, but I'm honestly still amazed that it's actually charting at all, considering its TikTok momentum died off ages ago. And on the topic of baffling, we had absolutely 0 comebacks this week and only 3 jumps, and they all were interesting to talk about. I mean, yes, you had the massive search for Passaporte by Raul Alejandro, Mr. Nice Guy into the top 10, which I already discussed, and it's great to see it there. But the other two, yeah, they're very interesting for me. Starting off with I Adore You by Hugo, Topic and Arash featuring Daycom at 16, which got a big boost thanks to the remix with Ellie Goulding and J Balvin of all people on it, which honestly I actually kind of like. I mean, both of them don't have the same level of presence that Daycom does, but honestly, the fact that they actually fit into this vibe quite well and sound genuinely invested is really insane to me. J Balvin especially honestly worked way better on this song than I expected. He should honestly try some more Afro House in the future. He's really good at it. Sadly though, I wish I was more invested in Holiday Road by Kesha up to 30, which doesn't surprise me considering it's seeming to be Spotify's equivalent to the Amazon exclusive deal, where this is getting a big push as a cover of a Christmas song around this season. I do expect this to go higher in the next couple of weeks, but still, I wish it was much better and covered a much better song than this. It's not good at all. Thankfully though, the large number of debuts, they at least make up for it, starting off surprisingly with number 45, Lights On by Marshmello and FAANGS.
Your word on my shoulders. I do it all again, I do it all. Turn the lights on.
Okay, I was honestly kind of aware that Marshmello released an album recently that went back to more of his future bass roots and is ironically titled The Roots. I mean, the artwork is very obviously inspired by Fred again. You're not that subtle, Marshmello. But jokes aside, I'm honestly surprised that this was the only song that crossed over from it, especially considering FAANGS hasn't got the sort of presence that you'd expect on a charting song. But with this, okay, it's just disappointing that this is more of exactly the same stuff as you'd expect on the Joytime series. There's not really much that distinguishes it from everything else here. I mean, in general, it's better produced, especially in the bass production on the drops, which actually has some genuine presence to it. It does give this track a bit more groove, and FAANGS being on vocals is a much better alternative than Marshmello at this point, especially with her vocal delivery fitting into this production really well. She does sound quite good and professional. See, this is why Marshmello should not be on vocals anymore. But man, this still feels very stock for Marshmello in terms of future bass. I get the album's going back to more of that sound, but between this and some of the other tracks on the album that I've heard, a lot of this stuff could have easily just fit straight onto the first Joytime or even the second one, and honestly, considering the rough production quality of those albums, that's not exactly a compliment, and it hasn't aged particularly well either. It does feel very dated to that time. I mean, it's not bad at all. I honestly can see the appeal of this, and I definitely prefer this over Miles on it, but in terms of the sound, I'm not exactly a fan of it anymore, and with this, yeah, it's perfectly fine, but you can honestly take it or leave it. Number 44, Sweet Memories by Zeds Dead. Okay, it's just weird seeing Zeds Dead on the charts, let alone with a solo track which he hasn't gotten in several years at this point. And with a track like this that barely has any streaming numbers, this got hit primarily off sales, and for an act like Zeds Dead who hasn't really had a consistent hit on this chart, that's just weird to me. I mean, at least got it with Subtronics and Grizz on their collaboration Grizztronics, where they had enough momentum off that particular song to get anything else to chart for a while. But with Zeds Dead not having any year-end hits at all, this really surprised me when I saw it actually chart here. And the surprising thing is that I actually really liked this one quite a bit. I mean, the immediate comparison that came to mind was Neurofunk, more specifically the kind that came out in the early 2010s on labels like Never Say Die, with the wubbing bass against the darker atmosphere and a groove that's a lot more stuttered and awkward, but honestly still fits into that old school vibe of the genre. I actually really like this production quite a bit. I mean, the atmosphere is potent as all hell, the ambient passages sound really gorgeous, and the drops have some genuine groove to them, helped by the female vocals vocals which sound really pretty and fit into the mood of this song quite well. Honestly, in composition alone, this might be one of my favorite Zeds Dead songs I've heard to date. I mean, it's the sort of track I never expected that Zeds Dead would be doing nowadays, but considering the production quality really worked for me, and this particular side of Never Say Die has honestly been one that I've genuinely missed in terms of sound recently. Honestly, yeah, I really like this track. Might be the most I've genuinely liked a song from him since Alive. That goes a long way for me. This is genuinely great. I don't expect it to stick around at all, but the fact it charted, yeah, welcome surprise for me. This is worth listening to. It's really good. Number 42, Dirty Cash Money Talks by PAWSA and the Adventures of Stevie V.
I need you, oh, money talks, dirty cash, I want you, dirty cash, I need you, oh.
I mean, I knew this was coming for a while, courtesy of the original song from The Adventures of Stevie V being one of those songs that's gotten a huge revival on TikTok as of recently, as a classic 80s trance song with a really great groove behind everything and some of the catchiest vocal hooks of that entire genre from that era. It's a track that's held up really well for me and genuinely sounds great to this day. Hell, I also shouldn't be surprised that the remixer here is actually charting, considering PAWSA has actually gotten a decent amount of momentum as someone who's made some remixes of old classic R&B and soul tracks with a sort of unique bend to them that's honestly made his material stand out really well. He's developed a pretty decent following in the UK, and I'm honestly not surprised that this was the song that made him cross over, although it is coincidentally timed with the original going viral over there, so it shouldn't be that surprising to me. Thank God too that the remix is actually legit, although I will be honest, it's not as good as the original for me, but most things aren't to this point, let's be real. Yes, it doesn't feature that classic 80s groove that made the original song so potent. This newer mix does feel a bit atonal at points, especially with the sections with barely any melody against the metallic leads. Honestly, I wish that the song would felt a little bit more filled out than what it actually is. But in general, this modern sound actually kind of fits well into the darker content of the lyrics, where the singer is actually talking about the sort of sex-driven work that gets her dirty cash, as you say, with a sort of humorous bend where honestly it's a bit jarring in terms of the sound, and really the original track suffered from this problem as well, so it's not exactly surprising here. But with this darker instrumentation, it honestly makes the track a lot more serious, and while it definitely doesn't work for me in the same way that the original track does, it is still potent as all hell, and the groove is especially good on this one. That being said, the original arrangement is so strong that it helps this already, and when the hook is this catchy and sounds this good in a modern context, especially with production that honestly does hit quite hard, yeah, I totally get the appeal of this one. It's not as good as the original, but on its own, yeah, this is a really good remix. I really like to see this stick around. Good on PAWSA for crossing over. This is really good. Number 40, Drums of Death by FKA Twigs and Koreless. One thing I've been very excited with this upcoming FKA Twigs album is the fact that she's been experimenting in genres that you don't usually expect her to do. I mean, Usexual and Perfect Stranger have gotten a lot more rotation for me than most of her last album's hits, but honestly, the fact that they sound so different from what FKA Twigs has done, yeah, it was quite fascinating for me. And now she's bringing on Koreless for production and giving him his first charting song to date, which as someone who owns AAoD, his 2021 album on vinyl and has been a fan for a while, yeah, this is wild to see him actually chart here. Long overdue for him. The only problem is, I don't think this song works at all, and I've honestly been dreading it since hearing it at the beginning of the Usexual music video. This one just didn't do it for me. The incredibly clunky big beat adjacent beat with barely any melody supporting anything, the annoying stuttered vocals that honestly don't really change up all that much across the entire track and get annoying in record time, the absolutely monotonous pacing and structure where the song just has no real direction to go at all, and even if FKA Twigs does sound good on the little passage that she gets in the middle of the track, it's just too little too late. I lose interest by that point, and really, this is just one of those songs that I don't really see myself returning to at all. It feels more like an interlude rather than an actual single, which for FKA Twigs is kind of weird. I hate saying this too, because on a texture level, this is really impressive. Koreless can produce this sort of production in his sleep, and with the sound of this being at least understandable coming from him, it makes sense why FKA Twigs brought him on board, and he does produce this song well. Problem is, it's just not really really my thing. This particular side of Big Beat has never been something that I've been that invested in. It's the same reason why a few songs from Charlie XCX's last album didn't really work for me, and even if I can respect this on a composition level, and I at least can see this maybe growing on me with the context of the album, on its own, it just doesn't work as well. So for now, I'm not exactly a fan of this just yet, but see how this goes when it goes in the context of the album. That's all I'm saying. It could get better there, but for now, not a fan of this at all. Number 26, Hold On Me by Kygo and Sandro Cavazza.
Cause love is all we need, darling. Oh, just hold on me. Cause love is all we need, darling.
So, given that Stars Will Align has kind of underperformed for Kygo's standards, especially considering it debuted in the top 10, Kygo decided in all of his good graces to collaborate with Sandro Cavazza again for the first song that he's charted in 4 years. And man, it feels like his presence has been missed because his collaborations with Kygo have been genuinely great. Now, since I haven't gotten the chance to discuss a lot of those other collabs on this channel, considering that I started the series long after Sandro Cavazza went into hiatus, let me just say this. These two are perfect for each other. All their charting songs together have again been legitimately great, and there's this underlying emotional gut punch to all of them, considering both of these names were very close to the late Avicii, and considering his passing in 2018, it inspired them to make some more emotionally resonant music, and that led us to Happy Now and Forever Yours, which are both some of the best tropical house hits of the 2010s and 2020s respectively, and the fact is, they're both excellent songs, really touching tributes as well. But okay, it's been 6 years. At this point, it feels like they could go more towards an upbeat sound, especially considering they were teasing it with Beautiful off of Kygo's last album, Golden Hour, and with this, yep, they went exactly there. This is great. Right off the bat, it's got a lot more of a grounded approach than Stars Will Align, going for more of an acoustic guitar approach with not much of Kygo's traditional piano integration, which is honestly quite interesting for me. And Sandro Cavazza once again proving why he's one of the best mainstream EDM vocalists, with his absolutely gorgeous mid-range explored throughout the entire track, before he belts on the build-ups for a really catchy chorus, and the drops, yeah, they're goddamn gorgeous. I mean, they play more of Kygo's classic synth style with a genuine groove and some upbeat energy. They feel genuinely fun and happy to be there, which considering the other collaborations between these two, yeah, this is a welcome change of pace for me. Again, reminded me a lot of the collaboration they did on Golden Hour with Beautiful, and that's a huge plus for me as that's one of my favorite songs on that album. And really with this, man, it makes me remember how much I miss Kygo's upbeat sound. This sound is really overdue for a return in the mainstream, and with him doing this well and the song being genuinely great, yeah, it's absolutely worth it. Shame it probably won't stick around as long as Stars Will Align, considering the streaming is surprisingly underperforming for this one. Seems to be a thing with the great songs that Kygo's released this year. I mean, between this and Without You, it's been really blatant. But hey, if it sticks around, I definitely can't complain. This is a really damn great song. Number 24, Now or Never by Bon Jovi and Pitbull. I was kind of a lot more morbidly curious about this one than I expected I would be. I mean, putting aside the fact that this debuted really high for modern Pitbull standards, it's also a collaboration that makes no sense at all until you look at the title and the other artists involved and realize that, yes, this is going to be another sample house track with Pitbull sampling the hook of It's My Life by Bon Jovi. The sort of track that I totally get why people do not like it, but for me, it's a childhood staple and I still absolutely love it despite how stupid it can be. It's one of those tracks that held up over the years for me. I don't know what to say, I really like it. So okay, good song to build a foundation around. I can at least see why this would work for some people. Problem is that I'm way more conflicted on this than I should be. I mean, on one hand, the classic hook is completely intact, where the lyrics actually resonate a lot more in a modern context, especially considering recent events in the United States where this sort of song is really welcome and the sort of thing that could really boost people's moods. And hell, Pitbull doesn't play into any stupid lines here, which which is a huge plus. It's more of a self-acknowledgement that his time is running out, he's going to enjoy every single moment of it, and continue living his life until the very end. Again, considering recent events, this sort of message is really welcome in the mainstream. The problem is that, man, this track feels really undercooked, and honestly, it's produced really badly. I mean, it's just a single verse. You can tell that Pitbull ran out of ideas really quickly here, and the production once again really does not do him any favors, as the hook feels very tinny and canned, and the overall vocal production is not good at all. Hell, it gets to the point where the vocals somehow fall off beats, which for a song like this, by a man who's been around for over 2 decades now, yeah, that's not really that good at all, and it really does sound amateurish as hell. It really ruins an otherwise good message for a song this clunky and absolutely amateurish. I mean, the ideas are there. I can at least see how some people can enjoy this, but for me, the production really lets it down. It's not that good at all, and while it's not terrible, I don't expect it's going to stick around. Honestly, good riddance. Not really a fan of this one. And finally, number 21, Swimming by Flawed Mangoes. On the topic of things I never saw coming, yeah, this really shocked me. I'm amazed that this is even a thing at all. So for those of you who don't know, and I'm fairly sure that's the majority of you, Flawed Mangoes is an American producer who leans more on elements of acoustic ambient and indie-tronica, and it has been around since 2020, developing the sort of cult following that, honestly, considering his roots, was really shocking to me. He's mostly independent, although most people who do know this guy probably know him from his release on Sandro's label Bitbird. Yes, that happened. Although precisely why this song finally charted, yeah, it's a little bit more unfortunate here. So it turns out this song is the backing soundtrack for the podcast of the walking homophobic loser that is Kygo, to the point where it's now being called a Kygo inspirational anthem and is blown up on TikTok because of this, to the point where it actually charted in the top 25 despite being released in January. I mean, I've got no idea whether this song will actually stick around, considering the sound has really not had any staying power in the mainstream despite Porter Robinson's best attempt with Nurture, and that's kind of a shame because, yeah, this is excellent. Seriously, the guitars sound absolutely stunning across this entire track, being more on the electric side with some really catchy melodies holding the entire track together, especially alongside the gorgeous atmosphere and those backing synths that sound really pretty, as the entire track paces along at a very smooth rate, even despite being more free form, with the sort of swelling effects in the middle that really add to this track quite a bit. Honestly, the relaxed vibe of this one really just stuck with me quite a bit. I love the way this sounds. I mean, it reminds me more than ever of Porter Robinson's ambient leaning tracks on Nurture, especially wind tempos. There's a lot of comparisons there, and while that track didn't stick around, yeah, if we're gonna get this as a modern version of it, especially considering where Porter Robinson is nowadays, I will definitely take this. I mean, I'm kind of at a loss for words for this one. It's the sort of track that I never expected would ever chart here, and considering how much momentum it's already got, yeah, this is blowing up to a quite frankly insane level for me, and while I don't expect it to stick around considering it's here basically off of a novelty, and with the sort of sound that's not exactly mainstream friendly, I would love to see this stick around and become a hit. If this actually manages to stick around and make the year-end list, 2025 is starting off great. This is excellent. And yeah, in a week even this good, it runs away with the best of the week. Although Hold On Me by Kygo and Sandro Cavazza was surprisingly close as the honourable runner-up, I absolutely love that track. For worst, honestly, there's not really a whole lot that I can see myself calling outright bad, but in terms of tracks that I'm less likely to come back to, unfortunately it's going to Drums of Death by FKA, Twigs and Koreless. Really, it's the sort of track that feels more like an interlude rather than a full track, so it kind of gets it by default. Not a huge fan of it. With the dishonourable runner-up going to Now or Never by Bon Jovi and Pitbull. Look, it was close to going to Marshmello, but that song at least did better than I expected in terms of sound, and with this one really failing in the production, it has to get there for me. It's still not that bad though. Next week, honestly, I'm not really sure what to expect. So there is the possibility of a Stromae song debuting in the top 5, and Martin Garrix's new single was at least doing numbers, so it at least could be another fascinating week. I definitely can't complain there. But yeah, that's all for this episode of Analysis of Dance. See you next time.